Hi, this is Colin Flaherty. You're listening to the Don't Make the Black Kids Angry podcast. Now, on this podcast, we talk about black violence, black on white crime, black on young, black on old, black on gay, black on straight, black on kitties, puppies, and turtles, wildly out of proportion, and how reporters and public officials are in denial, deceit, and delusion about it. So when you hear what we're going to start with tonight, you might be thinking, well, Colin, that's a little bit out of your lane. But no, it's not out of our lane, because we're going to start a little bit on the dividing line, but we're going to veer directly back into the middle of our lane by the time we get a few minutes into this podcast. So let's get going. We're going to talk about the memo, the Muellergate, the great FISA memo. And there's really a couple things that I haven't heard anybody talk about. There's a couple of obvious things that nobody's talking about and that I think are, might be interesting to mention. Let's talk about one thing that's directly in my lane. And that's the role of opposition research. I mean, for more than a couple of years, I did opposition research for a lot of Republican/conservative candidates all over the country. That wasn't my only thing, but it was kind of a thing I did a long time ago. And then when you do something, if you get a few notches on your belt, people keep calling you, you keep raising your prices in order to get them to say, we'll find somebody else. And they keep saying yes. So I kept doing it. But it was very interesting, this whole opposition research thing. I mean, to me, the most interesting thing about it was, I mean, everybody kind of knows it exists, but everybody hates it. I mean, so the first rule was, whatever you dug up, whatever you're doing, it really wasn't something that you could go around in public bragging about. There really were two sets of rules, one for Republicans/conservatives, one for Democrats. When you see something in the newspaper right around election time, maybe a month or two before, when you see something, this candidate has this domestic trouble, or this candidate has a racial epithet written on a farm that he used to hunt on 30 years ago, there are no reporters out there wearing out their shoe leather, knocking on doors, digging up the stories. The way it works is, and by the way, this is really clearly illuminated in this stuff we're going to talk about that's happening in Washington right now. The rules are, if you're a Republican, you can't get caught spreading it around. If you're a Democrat, they're very eager to get it from you. And so the way it works, if you're a conservative or a Republican, is, I mean, you do the research. Sometimes you just start cold. Other times you start with kind of what they call an investigative hypothesis. Maybe somebody will say something kind of innocuous, like, oh yeah, that person, that person's an incumbent. He sat on a board or commission, and we want to know if he attended the meetings. Or that person's a member of the Board of Education. We want to know how often they traveled. We want to know what were they really dining out heavily on the taxpayers' dime when they were traveling? And by the way, okay, little news you can use. If you ever decide you want to do any research and you're requesting public documents, you always want to request a copy of the receipts. That's what you want to see. There's lots of weird things on the receipts. Okay, so that's one end of it, kind of innocuous. The other end of it is, the place people start with this kind of stuff is the family court, the divorce court, the domestic court. If there's restraining orders, if there's divorces, if there's lawsuits, if there's liens, if there's arrests, some of that stuff can get very nasty. And that's kind of what you would expect it to be, right? But if you're a Republican passing this stuff around, they will do a story about how Johnny Smith, the Republican, is trying to smear Freddie Smith, the wonderful Democrat, with all this stuff that just happens to be true. But we don't like it anyway, because Because this campaign should be about ideas, not personal smears. The campaigns are really always only about one thing. Who's the best candidate? Who's the best person running for this office? So I remember talking to one of my buddies in San Diego. Anybody in San Diego will know who this is. And I was talking to him on the phone. He had just gotten the Republican nomination for a seat in the California State Assembly in a Republican district, which pretty much, the election was still 6 months away, but that pretty much meant, listen, that thing's in the bag. Democrats are not going to put a lot of money into that race because it would just be money down a rat hole. And I was talking to him about that. He said, yeah, it looks like we're going to win. This was 6 months out. So he didn't really do that much in the campaign. I guess he worked a little, did a little, sent out a little mail, but he did not do any opposition research. And there are some really smart people running these campaigns, and somebody doing a poll somewhere in that neck of the world in California, they saw this guy who thought he had it locked up. They saw there was a vulnerability there. Not many people liked him, and the people that did like him didn't even like him that much. So they had a candidate. This guy was one of these perennial candidates, the person you just shove his name onto the ballot just to kind of hold the flag up. The person likes it. They get a seat or two on the Democratic Central Committee. They get everybody to think they're a lot more important than they really are. And they fool themselves into thinking that if they get 10% of the vote this time and 11% the next time they run, well, they're going to be identified as a real strong contender, and the powers that be are going to lift them up and place them on the ballot somewhere, when it works just the opposite, of course. Anyway, there was one of those guys who was running. His name was Tom Connolly. So Tom wins the last minute because the Democrats came in, threw all this mail, all this phoning, all this footwork into the district, and he squeaked out a victory, a Democrat and a Republican seat. I don't know if it was next 6 weeks or 6 months, but somebody finally decided to do a little opposition research after the election was over. And Connolly turned out to be kind of a bad actor with a very long record. Listen, this is the kind of thing, if you don't state it right, somebody will come along and spank you. Let's just say he had a long and sketchy record as a lawyer and as a person who dealt with children and property. And the San Diego, if you want to look it up, San Diego Union-Tribune did a huge story on it. And people were going, man, how did that guy ever get elected? Well, it's because nobody did the opposition research. And so if you flip that onto the Democrat side, when the Democrats go out there and do the research, they pretty much just wrap it up in a bow and give it to a reporter and say, yeah, Johnny Jones, that Republican conservative over there, is a bad guy. Here's all the details of how he owed $100 on his taxes here, how he was late for this, how he got a parking ticket there, and the guy's really unfit for office. And the reporter goes, oh yeah, that's absolutely true. And I mean, that's really the way it works. And so we saw that this week. Well, we've been seeing it in Washington for the last week or month when people are talking about this now famous, what's it called, GPS Fusion company that did this opposition research dossier. So in all the times I was doing opposition research, I mean, yeah, you find this stuff out, some good, some bad, some really bad. And it's like, okay, I got to figure out a way to do something with this. I got to get it out there. But I will tell you, the big thing was, how do we get it to a reporter who's without making the reporter think he's doing something which is normally anathema to him, which is doing something which will benefit a Republican/conservative. It's not just about passing it to one guy to the other, to the other, to the other, and that's the way it works. But in my wildest dreams, I never imagined taking a dossier of what we found, or better still, taking a dossier of innuendo and claims and rumors and giving them to a law enforcement official who'd give them to a grand jury, who'd give them to somebody else, and all of a sudden, then you give them to some, intensely partisan liberal reporter like a David Corn or Isikoff, and they would make a big deal about it. No, in a way, most opposition research is the opposite of that. Because especially if you're a conservative, you just can't give somebody a piece of paper that says, oh yeah, that liberal over there, yeah, he's been found guilty of beating his wife. Yeah, true story, by the way. The papers ignored it. We kind of figured out a way to deal with it. Oops, can't tell you that story. Anyway, you really got to show it. The level of evidence, no reporter, nobody, you really got to show it. You just can't give somebody a piece of paper that's all dolled up and say, oh yeah, I heard candidate Smith was running around with some hookers downtown and they were doing methamphetamine. Oh yeah. Put it out in your newspaper. Newspaper reporters are not that stupid, no matter how partisan they are. Editors are not that stupid, no matter how bad they want it to be true. They're just not going to run a story that they can't back up. And saying somebody was doing this or that in a hotel room and you heard all these rumors, and yeah, here's all the rumors here. Hey, yeah, you're welcome. Here's all that collection of rumors. Yeah, the rumors that I made up, but here they are. Yeah, go publish them now. The stakes are high for people passing this stuff around. One of the people on my Facebook page, a very good friend of mine, he was involved in a campaign. And they put out I guess you would call it a hit piece. And they just misstated a fact. They kind of almost stated it the right way, but they pushed it about 1 degree further than they pushed it. It was one of those deals, the comma should have been here and it went there. And it was just wrong enough to raise eyebrows. That was a $1 million lawsuit. Legal fees and judgment, and the judgment was over $1 million. God, the guy who paid that $1 million, that set off a chain of dominoes in his life that's still tripping into the horizon, and that was a couple of years ago. And so the idea that you could just have a firm and employ a British spy who go to collect these rumors in Moscow from hookers in Moscow, and then give them to some reporter and think they're going to bite on them. I guess David Corn and Isikoff bit on them, but it's but there's the thing, the big papers play this game as like, if I can't verify that, I won't run it. But if somebody else runs it and somebody talks about it, well, then it's fair game. How many people? I'm thinking of Harry Reid when he said Mitt Romney didn't pay his taxes. Then I'm thinking of the woman at the DNC who said the same thing. People just say. I guess see if you're. That's the rules of the game for them. You could say something, and nobody's going to spank you. But if you're a conservative and you say something like that, you can be assured you will get spanked for saying that. This is a good example. These guys are spreading this dossier around. Not only did anybody get spanked, boy, they just skipped right over the major media. They gave it right to the FBI. This is opposition research that the guy basically made up. To their credit, the New York Times and Washington Post, and CNN, they had a whack at a lot of it. Again, they didn't take the first bite of the apple, but they were waiting for somebody else to do that. But the FBI took a bite of the apple of this dossier based on rumor and innuendo. Oh, Trump was in a hotel room with 86 hookers, and they were all doing X, Y, and Z. Yeah, that's an absolutely true rumor. Well, I can't really verify it, but it's a true rumor. I heard it. And so you take this to a FISA court, and that's how you get warrants to spy on Americans involved in Trump's campaign. all based on this phony baloney opposition research. That the kind of opposition research, if you took that to any city council candidate or mayoral candidate or congressional candidate in America, they'd look at you and laugh. The only thing good about the opposition research is what can somebody do with it? If you can't do anything with it, it's no good. I mean, what you do in this opposition research, you start out with rumors, innuendo, and slander. That's what you start with. And basically, you're saying, okay, I heard all this nasty business. Can I prove any of it? If you can't prove it, I can't imagine somebody putting that in a file and giving it to a client and saying, oh yeah, here's all the lies, rumors, and innuendo we've heard about a candidate opposing us. Yes, can I have my money now? Yeah, I put extra lies in there, so I'm charging you extra for that. God, that's not how that world works. I didn't think so. And that's how the FBI works? Wow. And so now, all this week, now we're going to get back into our lane here a little more. Thought you might like those little war stories. You know what? I found myself going, I don't normally do this, but I found myself saying, oh yeah, I got that story, but I don't think I want to tell most of those stories. Anyway, so let's get back. Let's slide back into our lane. How many times this week did you hear a reporter on all the major national networks, CNN and MSNBC, how many times did you hear a reporter arguing against releasing that memo? Arguing against releasing any of that stuff? The Washington Post, the New York Times, 3 networks. I mean, there were people going, no, we can't release that memo. It would hurt national security. It would hurt national security if people realized that the FBI were being duped by this ridiculous opposition research dossier. Oh yeah, it absolutely would. I mean, if we let the crooks know it's that easy to fool the FBI, yeah, I could see that would be definitely damage the national security. But the people were saying, for the first time, we've never heard reporters say, don't release that information. And more than one reporter talked about something we talked about a few weeks ago, where it's weird having all this come out now at the same time that movie, the Washington, it's called The Post, is out. The Post is all about the Pentagon Papers. Anybody old enough to remember that knows it was just like, thousands and thousands of pages of documents. They were actually all kind of dry. I remember when I was in high school, I actually tried to read them and I kind of got through a lot of them, but it's just a long record of deceit and military failure that was really unmasked by these Pentagon Papers. And the New York Times published some, the Washington Post trying to publish some. They had to go to court. And, so you see that in the ad, there's some guy walks in the trailer for the movie. Some guy walks up to Tom Hanks, who's Ben Bradley, who I had a chance to meet a couple times. And Ben Bradley, and Tom, the guy goes, well, Tom, are we going to get in trouble for publishing this? Aren't they supposed to be secret or something like that? And Tom Hanks, the character, says, that's what we do around here. We really, we get secrets and publish them. We tell the truth about stuff. Now the very same Washington Post is saying, no, we're not going to do that. But we don't want to do that anymore. No, we don't want to tell the truth about this. We'd rather those files stay hidden. And we'd rather have this innuendo, gossip, and lies and slander in the dossier. We'd much prefer if all of you guys accepted that as fact. Whew. Okay, but here's the thing. People were saying, I've never seen that happen before. Of course we have. Where have we seen that happen before? Where have we seen that happen before where reporters were saying, A, I don't want those videos released, and B, if you released them, you shouldn't have released them because you're going to do a lot of damage by letting people really know what's happening here. Come on, you can get this one. Come on. We're going to give 2 examples. We're really going to give 1.5 examples. Does anybody remember what happened when the St. Michael Brown of Ferguson episode was escalating? Everybody was doing their hands up, don't shoot. Big lie. And all of a sudden, the sheriff and the chief of police down there, I think it was the sheriff, said, oh yeah, we've got video showing this guy as a stone criminal. And what did the reporters say? How did the reporters react to that?
That was Michael Brown's family and the family's attorneys speaking to the press. Back with me is Associate Professor of Political Science and Public Affairs at Columbia University and Fellow at the Roosevelt Institute, Dorian Warren. Dorian, the family clearly believes that this release of the video, surveillance video, was strategic. They called it a distraction, a diversion, part of a broader strategy to deflect attention from what happened to their son, and calling repeatedly for calm. I think that there seems to be, from the reporters we've talked to on the ground, a real measurable difference between what happened 2 nights ago, what happened last night, and it's clear that the family very much wants to tell the community it is not time for rioting, it is about peaceful protest here. Let's talk first about the surveillance video. It is hard to imagine how badly the police chief miscalculated if in fact it is that benign.
I think the family said it right, and I think that they felt like they had to make a statement in response to what the police chief did this morning. You're going to release surveillance video and an incident report of a robbery, but still nothing about the actual shooting. And then we learn in the midst of that press conference that the officer apparently fled town a couple days ago. So now someone who should be charged, right, is not even in his residence at this point.
And that, I think, coupled with the injustice that was done to Michael Brown, the feeling that the community has no relationship with the force that polices it, and that the only things we've heard from this police chief are accusations of violence from the community, a defense of Darren Wilson, the officer involved in all this, and the news, as you point out, that he is no longer
remember the police chief says himself that the officer, that Wilson, had no knowledge that he was not stopping Mike Brown of suspected robbery, that the two had nothing to do with each other. So he says that at the press conference after he releases this report and this footage of a robbery. It makes no sense. It's so bizarre, it's mind-boggling how bizarre and incompetent this police chief and all week long how he has handled this entire incident.
I wonder what you think, from the perspective of moving the ball forward here. Is this an issue where the federal government needs to play an even larger role than just an investigation? The president has called on Eric Holder to launch a probe into what happened here. It seems kind of clear that the Ferguson Police Department is not perhaps up to par in terms of really looking at this through a clear lens. Do you think there are other things that should be done to ensure that justice does take its course?
So I don't know the precise legal justification for when the federal government can intervene in this case. However, what we do know, just historically, it's always taken the federal government when it comes to the rights and the lives of black people. It's always taken federal government intervention over local control and local police. Because we cannot trust usually local police to serve justice. It almost always is the federal government that has to come in and play a role.
What is also so surprising here is the sort of tribal nature of the police force in terms of closing ranks on its own. We know that the police chief is out there saying that Darren Wilson was a gentleman, and at the same time releases a video showing Michael Brown to be a violent offender. The narrative there is clearly established and plays in. This is the Trayvon Martin case is fresh in everybody's mind. The maligning of a young black male as an aggressor to justify the disproportionate and fatal response of the perpetrator. And
again, I think this is why the family came out and is asking people to remain peaceful. Protest, please, but remain peaceful, because everything that comes out from this police chief, it is infuriating even more to people in the world watching. I want to go now to Ferguson. On the phone, we have national reporter for MSNBC.com, Tremaine Lee. Tremaine, that was an emotional press conference. The family really underscoring the pain that they have felt since the death of their son and the injustice they believe they have been served, not only by his death, but by the police chief in releasing this video. Tell us more about the reaction from where you were.
The feeling is almost palpable, and you can tell that it's spreading from the family into all those who are supporting them. that they feel the timing of the release was dubious, that it was a matter of, as you heard them say, smoke and mirrors. The fact that it came out this morning and no one had heard anything about this before is very troubling to the family.
Dorian Warren and Tremaine Lee, this is a fluid, developing situation. Breaking news. Thanks for hanging with me. That is all for us. We will have more continuing coverage. The Ed Show is up next.
And MSNBC wasn't the only place where the reporters were saying, and talking heads were going, no, I don't think we should have released that because that's really not a good way to manage that situation because, everybody, I'm not going to say my catch line now. We're not done yet. Everybody knows that if you release that video, you're just going to get a lot of people, black people pissed off. And you know what they're going to do? They're going to create violence, right? Everybody knows that. People were actually saying stuff like that. Dana Perino, Fox News, Fox contributor. She's on Fox and 5 or something like that. Former Bush press secretary. I very distinctly remember her talking about what a mistake it was, what a PR mistake it was to release these videos because we have to manage the situation. And the one thing we cannot do is tell the truth about it because we know that's... No, this is not my catch line. Because that's really going to get the black kids angry. Cannot do that. No siree, Bob. And so now we go into phase 2 of the memo where people say, we never should have released it, and then we release it. Well, I don't believe it anyway because there's nothing in there. I mean, we also went through phase 2 of that for St. Michael Brown of Ferguson. Got the video of him acting like a criminal. Got the video of all the reporters going, oh, no, we shouldn't have released that. Now, 2 years later, we have another video of somebody doing a documentary going, oh, yeah, everything you see in that video wasn't true. Here's what really happened in the video.
There is new unrest to report tonight in Ferguson, Missouri, after the release of new surveillance video showing Michael Brown the day he was fatally shot by Officer Darren Wilson back in 2014. That video shown in a new documentary film raising questions about whether he robbed a convenience store. But that convenience store claims the video was edited. And late today, the St. Louis prosecutor releasing the full unedited version. ABC's Steve Osunsami in Ferguson.
Different people are seeing different things tonight in this newly released video from this Ferguson convenience store. Keep your eye on the box of cigarillos. That's Michael Brown Jr. the night before he was killed in 2014 by a city police officer. A filmmaker and Brown's family says what he's doing here is trading the carton of smokes for marijuana. And they believe that he leaves the carton in the store, hoping to come get it later.
That's not stealing the store.
That interpretation matters because of this video that authorities released days after the shooting. The next morning, Brown is back at the store and what police have always described as a strong-arm robbery. His one hand grabbing the cigars, his other on the storekeeper's neck.
The picture they painted of my nephew was not right.
Tonight, the store is adamant they don't do layaway, and they've released the full video that they say shows there was no exchange for drugs.
He's going to start arguing with the clerk because the clerk's going to tell him, no, I'm not taking marijuana. Get out of my store.
The prosecutor, who refused to charge Ferguson police officer Darren Wilson, agrees with the store.
The suggestion that he's coming back to pick up what he bartered for is just stupid.
And what about what we saw out there on the BART system? I'll repost this video on my minds.com channel. The video we made on YouTube where this was one of the most astonishing videos I've ever seen. It was a member of the BART, the Bay Area Rapid Transit System, on TV getting interviewed. There had been a series of large-scale episodes of black mob violence, which we documented here. On these BART trains, large groups of black people going through the trains, beating up white people, laughing. Get the public officials going out going, no, I just can't figure out what's going on here. I know it happened in Oakland, but didn't you guys see that movie called Fruitvale Station? I mean, that's pretty much proof positive that white people are always messing with black people in Oakland. I mean, you saw that movie, right, Colin? It's just about that. Anyway, so this woman who's on the board of BART, she's on one of these public affairs shows nobody ever watches, and she comes out and goes, yeah, I've been really concerned about that. I wrote a letter to the BART. This is a member of the board of directors of BART. She writes a letter to the vice president in charge of PR communications, and she said, hey, why can't we see the videos? I mean, you guys have tons and tons of cameras on BART, right? Well, we learned after the first incident that a lot of the cameras were dummies. But still, there's lots of cameras on BART trains and in BART stations. So the woman goes, hey, why don't you really, we had 70 black people rampaging through that train. And you won't release the videos? And the person at the head of BART, the VP of BART goes, well, yeah, we're not going to release the videos because we think it would be unfair to black people to show that. She said that. And so that's the fact. Okay, so that's the fact on the table. What did every single reporter in the Bay Area do? Did they storm the BART station going, give us those tapes, give us those tapes? Did they do what the Washington Post did, went to Herculean, heroic efforts to get copies of those Pentagon papers? What did the reporters in the Bay Area do to get those papers, to get those videos of this epic level of black criminality on BART trains? What did they do? Not a GD thing. Nothing. I mean, their silence is complicity. Their silence is exactly the same as people in Ferguson going, oh no, we can't release those videos. No, that would be bad. Oh no, they're just sitting there quiet, pretending like none of this happened. No, it didn't happen, Colin. No. Oh, we don't need those videos, Colin. BART's already told us it's not a problem. BART's already told us that their system is a lot safer this year than last year. That's like, everybody's got the numbers down. So every time you see these patterns of epic levels of black criminality, they always trot somebody out who doesn't know anything about anything. And they remind us, oh yeah, we're a lot safer this year than last year. I mean, that's what they've been doing in Baltimore for a long time. But now it's like, even in Baltimore, they're just having a hard time even looking at each other in the eye and telling each other that this big lie is still even a little bit credible. I mean, in Baltimore, think about the stories we've done in Baltimore just in the last few weeks. We've done stories in Baltimore where 16 black high schools don't have anybody who can read or write above a third grade level. Parentheses. That means they can't read or write at all. 16 high schools in Baltimore. Then we did a story about the Target at the Mondawmin Mall, ground zero for the Baltimore riots. Ground zero. They had a big community meeting, and all the people from the community were at this meeting. And they're wondering why Target wants to move out of the Mondawmin Mall. Why would anybody want to move out of the Mondawmin Mall? Colin, it's safe here. They're making a lot of money. This is crazy. This is in the middle of the riots. The Target store is a target of relentless, unorganized and organized black violence and black criminality. And finally, they just pulled up stakes and said, oh yeah, we got to go. Sorry about that. Oh no, we don't know. It doesn't have anything to do with crime or violence. It's just that, oh darn it, got to go. We'll explain it to you later. Then there's a story in the paper this week in Baltimore, where the real estate brokers are going, oh yeah, all the restaurants are for sale now. Everybody wants to get out of Baltimore. They give all these reasons, and then somebody chimes in and says, well, maybe crime has something to do with it. Then they have a police, this is like this week. And there's a police academy graduate from Baltimore this week. Basically one third of the people graduating don't know anything at all about the law or being a cop, but they just had to pass them on through. This is a city that is disintegrating. And all the while, the only thing the reporters can say, just like the reporters in DC and the reporters in Ferguson, is don't show us the facts. Don't show us the information, whatever you do, because we really don't need our minds to explode here. We have a nice little fairy tale, a nice little bubble that some people in Baltimore still believe that we're charmed city. Oh yeah, you can go get some crabs in these nice houses, nice restaurants. And you go down to the docks, you can go to the inner harbor. And all that violence down there, that big bad guy Colin puts on video, like that guy that That musician that just got killed for no damn reason whatsoever a couple weeks ago, except for the fact that he's white. That's isolated, Colin. God, even the mayor's not on board with that anymore. The mayor of Baltimore came out a few weeks ago and said, yeah, our city's out of control. So she fired the cop and put in another chief. She fired the chief of police and put another one in. Nothing, and nobody's talking about changing anything. Nobody's talking about stopping catch and release. Everybody's talking about midnight, some version of midnight basketball. Nobody's saying, listen, if you commit a crime, we're just going to put you in jail for a while. Okay? Is that okay with you? I mean, we don't know if we're going to rehabilitate you or not. But we pretty much know you're not going to be shooting anybody if you're in jail in Baltimore. That's weird. One of the weirdest stories out of Baltimore of the last decade is how this black gang of Baltimore, I think they're actually called the Black Guerrillas. They run the prisons. They run the prisons. That was the big story. I mean, you had one guy, like the head of the gang, he was like getting multiple female guards pregnant. I don't know if they were what were they doing? Waiting in line outside? Were they all taking a number? So they could go in and, party with him for a couple hours and, get themselves with child? If you ever want to read just a truly crazy, crazy story of this enormous level of black dysfunction in Baltimore, just go look up the story on the Black Guerrillas running the prisons. So the guys from the hood would be in jail in the hood, and the guards would be from the hood. So you might go in there deciding you're going to act one way or another as a guard. But once the fellas say, oh yeah, I remember you from 33rd and 3rd, and I know your sister, your cousin, your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, and all your children, and you're going to do what I say. I mean, that's how they just basically turned over the running of the jail to the inmates, and everybody knew it, and it was going on for a long time. And so now the central organizing feature of life in Baltimore, of civilized life in Baltimore, is, okay, how do we live in Baltimore while avoiding this tsunami of black criminality that everybody is so comfortable with? How do I get comfortable with that? How do I enter my own state of denial, deceit, and delusion about it? People live in Baltimore for their own reasons. Whatever your reasons are, you better have some pretty healthy dose of denial, deceit, and delusion to make it work for you. You better be able to ignore the fact that your neighbor just got robbed and bonked on the head. You better ignore the fact that your car's window was just busted. You better ignore the fact that your city council member who lives in a nice high rise, the fellas got into her parking garage and beat the crap out of her. Oh yeah, she's 82 years old. But even she's already made her peace with that. She doesn't care about that. Because if she got angry at the fellas for doing that to her, that would burst her bubble, and you don't want to burst a bubble anywhere in Baltimore. And isn't that so? And so let's get back to our lane, which is we started off on the opposition research. And we started off on all the reporters going, oh no, we cannot release those things. Boy, it's weird. The reporters are just so in such a determined state not to do anything to break up the little bubbles they live in. Whether it's this bubble of denial, deceit, and delusion about black violence, how it's wildly out of proportion, or how about this other fairy tale they're so determined to perpetuate? That Trump and his cronies are over there in Russia colluding to steal American elections, when we know it was just the opposite and it happened at the highest reaches of the American government. How did we ever forget what Chuck Schumer said on TV just about 13 months ago? Listen to Chuck Schumer on the Rachel Maddow show.
But he's taking these shots, this antagonism, this taunting to the intelligence community.
You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. So even for a practical, supposedly hard-nosed businessman, he's being really dumb to do this.
How do we ignore that? How do we pretend that's not something we want to hear more about? That's not just some Well, let me I was going to say, that's just not some creepy old white dude hanging around a coffee shop. That's a member of the U.S. Senate. That's the head of the minority party, used to be the majority leader in the U.S. Senate. But come to think of it, those two facts about being a creepy old white dude and being a head of the minority party in the Senate, they're not really mutually exclusive, if you catch my drift. And there's Obama. You guys remember that? I guess I should go fish it up, but you guys remember? I just remembered it myself. You guys remember when Obama, I think it was 2012, he's caught on an open mic talking to the Russian ambassador, and he says, after this election, I can be a lot more flexible about doing some deals. Tell that to Putin. And none of that's relevant when we want to talk about Russian and Russian influence in our elections and what the role of the spy and the intelligence agencies are in this election. And by the way, all these big, the State Department, they essentially have their own intelligence division. Homeland Security's got one, FBI's got one, CIA, NSA. They talk about 17 intelligence divisions. That's a lot of intelligence agencies for people who really want to take something out on Trump. And by the way, here's the way it works. In the ideal world, you have a civil service job. You give the person a job based on their qualifications, and you just say, listen, we're not going to ask you to be part of the shifting governments every 2, 4, 8 years. You're just going to do your job, keep your eye on the road, keep your hands upon the wheel, and we'll take care of the partisan stuff. You do the technical stuff. What's clear after 8 years of Obama, the way to do it is you just find when you're looking for people in that environment that work in the FBI, maybe they're newer to the FBI, maybe they've been there a couple of years. All you want to do when you promote somebody, you're just asking one question. Will that person play ball? Will that person play ball? Are they on our side? Are they going to do what we say? They're not looking for leadership. They're looking for fellowship. This is what the Obama crowd did in 8 years. They were just yanking the partisans way up the civil service chain, all the way to the top, as high as they could get them. And the political appointees, as the Obama administration ran out, they started converting the political appointees from political jobs into civil service jobs. So everybody kind of met in the middle. And the result was, there was a lot of Democratic hostility kind of baked into the federal government. And we're seeing that. We're seeing that right now. We're seeing people pretend none of it's happening. My buddy the other day, the great Willie Shields, said, "Hey, Colin, have you ever seen anything like this before? This wholesale denial, deceit, and delusion, people really actively trying to subvert a government, undo the results of an election?" I said, yeah, it was that movie 7 Days in May, where Burt Lancaster and his buddies were trying to get rid of the president, who I think was it Melvin Douglas? I don't even remember. That's the level we're operating on. And so when we see all this denial, deceit, and delusion from these reporters, and we say, what I say is, oh yeah, we've been seeing that exact same denial, deceit, and delusion for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years when it comes to reporting on racial violence and black on white hostility. And so everybody's been kind of sharpening their knives, sharpening their skills, and this is how it's turning out. I don't know what's going to happen from here. I don't know what's going to happen to that sacred profession of opposition research. If anybody's overly eager to hear more opposition research stories, they're actually kind of interesting, but it's not the kind of thing I'm going to put in a podcast. I don't care. Maybe we can do that over a cup of coffee some night somewhere. Maybe even down at CPAC. Is anybody going to CPAC? I'm thinking about going down. I don't know if I want to go down or not. If somebody sponsored me to go down there, I would probably change my mind. Anyway, if you're a CPAC person, I've only been once. I just kind of went for a couple hours, so I really don't even know kind of like what the drill is down there. So if anybody knows anything about CPAC and what it takes to make your way through there and have fun and meet interesting people down there, let me know. I just don't know if CPAC is the kind of place where they frown on things that make black kids angry.